The metal gate groaned to a halt at 3:22 in the morning, and I knew we had a problem. Seed Gate Sound. I'm Mark Connor, 58, retired SWAT, and I've seen enough midnight trouble to know when someone's testing your defenses. If you're watching Karenology, you know it's never just vandalism. Two figures in dark hoodies were crouched by my gate mechanism, bolt cutters glinting in the streetlight. One held a flashlight while the other worked on the wiring. Seed, flashlight, detail. Bold as brass, right there in the open. I grabbed my tactical flashlight and stepped onto the porch. "Hey!" I called out, my voice cutting through the December night air. They bolted, sneakers slapping wet pavement, disappearing into the maze of suburban streets like roaches when you flip a switch. Seed, sneaker dar, sound. I examined the damage. Gate motor housing cracked open, wires severed clean, control panel sparking. Professional work, not some teenage prank. Have you ever had that sinking feeling when you realize someone's been planning this? That cold weight in your stomach that says you're not dealing with random crime? Morning brought Ronald Taylor, our homeowner association chairman, along with a city inspector I'd never seen before. Taylor's the kind of guy who irons his polo shirts and thinks a clipboard makes him important. The inspector looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Mark, we've got a problem," Taylor announced, not even glancing at my damaged gate. "Your entrance barrier violates the new safety ordinance. Too high, blocks sight lines for emergency vehicles." I pointed at the cut wires dangling from the motor housing. "Ron, someone tried to break in last night, cut my security system to pieces." He shrugged like I'd mentioned the weather. "That's unfortunate, but city code is city code. 48 hours to remove the obstruction, or it's $500 per day in fines." The inspector cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Mr. Connor, I'm just here to document the violation. The damaged gate actually makes compliance easier since you'll need to rebuild anyway." "Rebuild what?" I asked. "You're telling me I can't protect my property?" "You can install appropriate fencing," Taylor said, checking something off on his precious clipboard. "Within regulation height limits, this fortress-style barrier has to go." I watched him walk back to his pristine Honda Civic, already mentally calculating how much this was going to cost me. The inspector lingered for a moment. "Look, Mr. Connor, I've got kids, I get it. But the ordinance passed last month. Someone must have filed a complaint." 3 guesses who that someone was. That afternoon, I rigged temporary barriers using sawhorses and yellow caution tape, hoping to at least mark my property line. Looked like a construction zone, but it was better than nothing. My neighbor across the street, Mrs. Henderson, stood at her mailbox longer than necessary, shaking her head with that pinched expression she reserves for moral disappointments. By evening, my phone was buzzing. Henderson had called code enforcement about my unpermitted safety hazards and aesthetic violations. The city inspector arrived before I'd finished dinner. "Mr. Connor, these temporary barriers don't meet any safety standards. They're actually more dangerous than nothing." He looked genuinely sorry. "Either install professional-grade fencing that meets the new requirements, or remove everything." "How much time do I have?" "Usually 72 hours, but with the complaints coming in," he shrugged. "Tomorrow morning would be better." I stood in my driveway that night, looking at the broken gate mechanism and the pathetic yellow tape fluttering in the wind. Old instincts kicked in. When someone corners you, you don't retreat. You figure out who's hunting you and why. But what I didn't know yet was that destroying my gate was just the opening move. The next morning brought Tommy Murphy to my door, carrying a toolbox and wearing that careful expression kids get when they're about to break their parents' rules. Tommy's 19, fresh out of trade school, and his dad, Pete, lives 3 houses down. Nice kid, knows his way around electrical work. "Mr. Connor," he said, glancing over his shoulder like he expected his father to materialize. "I heard about your gate trouble. Thought maybe I could help with the wiring." I let him in, curious why Pete Murphy's son was volunteering for a job his old man would definitely disapprove of. The neighborhood had been pretty clear about where they stood on my situation. Tommy worked quietly for 20 minutes, sorting through the damaged components. Finally, he looked up from the mess of severed cables. "This wasn't random vandalism," he said quietly. "See how these cuts are angled? Professional wire strippers. And look here." He pointed to the control box. They knew exactly which circuits to hit to disable everything without triggering the backup alarm. Someone who knows security systems. Or someone who had the installation manual. Tommy's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Mr. Connor, I need to tell you something, but you can't let anyone know it came from me. I nodded, and he continued. Last night, I was coming home late from my girlfriend's place. Saw two guys walking away from your street. Recognized them from the coffee shop on Maple. They're brothers Miguel and Raul Garcia. They do odd jobs for people around here. What kind of odd jobs? Tommy's hands stilled on the wires. The kind Mr. Taylor calls property maintenance. I've seen them clear out old fences, remove unauthorized garden structures, stuff like that. They get paid in cash, and they don't ask questions. The pieces click together like a magazine sliding into place. Taylor hired them. I can't prove that, Tommy said quickly. But those brothers, they drink coffee at Murphy's Diner every morning around 7. Sit at the corner booth, talk real loud about their work. I was already reaching for my jacket. Tommy, your dad know you're here? No, sir, and he'd ground me for life if he found out. Tommy packed up his tools. My parents think you're stirring up trouble, trying to make the neighborhood look bad. They don't want me getting involved. After he left, I drove to Murphy's Diner and ordered coffee at the counter. Didn't have to wait long. 7:15 sharp, two guys in work clothes slouched into the corner booth. Miguel looked about 28, stocky build, calloused hands. Raul was younger, maybe 25, kept checking his phone. I opened a newspaper and listened. Taylor wants the Henderson place next, Miguel was saying. Old lady's got that garden fence that's supposedly 6 inches too high. Raul laughed. Easy money, $300 each, just like the Connor job. That Connor guy's got some serious security, though. Motion lights, cameras, the works. Good thing Taylor told us which circuits to cut first. My coffee cup rattled against the saucer. I forced my hand steady, kept reading the sports page like my life depended on it. How many more on the list? Raul asked. Taylor says maybe 4 or 5. Wants to clear out all the old-timers who think rules don't apply to them. Says once they sell and move, the new people will be easier to work with. They were talking about ethnic cleansing, suburban style, get rid of the long-term residents, bring in people who'd follow HOA rules without question. What would you do if you discovered your neighborhood was being systematically targeted? I sat there for another 10 minutes, memorizing every word, every detail. When they left, I followed at a distance, watched them drive to a work site 3 streets over. Sure enough, they were dismantling someone's decorative garden arbor. Back home, I found an official notice taped to my front door. Final warning, property violation, fine assessment begins tomorrow at 800 hours. $500 per day until compliance achieved. Homeowner Association Administrative Board. I called the police non-emergency line and filed a vandalism report, complete with my security camera footage. Detective Cole showed up that afternoon, a tired-looking guy in his 40s who'd probably seen enough petty neighborhood disputes to fill a book. Mr. Connor, I've reviewed your footage, he said, standing in my driveway. Problem is, it's too dark to make positive identification. Could be anyone in those hoodies. What about fingerprints on the gate mechanism? Bolt cutters don't usually leave prints, and they wore gloves anyway. He closed his notepad. Without clear video evidence or witnesses, there's not much we can do. I watched his patrol car disappear around the corner, already knowing what came next. My phone rang an hour later. Mr. Connor, this is Ronald Taylor. I understand you filed a police report about your gate? That's right. Well, I'm sorry to inform you that continuing to delay compliance while pursuing frivolous investigations will result in additional penalties. The administrative board has voted to accelerate your fine schedule. The smugness in his voice made my jaw clench. Meaning what exactly? $1,500, effective immediately, payable within 48 hours. He hung up before I could respond, leaving me standing in my kitchen with the phone buzzing in my hand and the taste of rage in my mouth. The $1,500 fine notice arrived by certified mail the next morning, along with a threat of legal action if payment wasn't received within 48 hours. I stared at the official letterhead, feeling that familiar burn in my chest that used to hit me during high-stakes operations. You know that moment when you realize you're not just dealing with bureaucracy anymore, when it becomes personal warfare. I drove back to Murphy's Diner, ordered the same coffee, took the same seat. 7:15, like clockwork, the Garcia brothers slid into their corner booth. This time, I came prepared with my phone's voice recorder app running in my jacket pocket. "Got another job from Taylor today," Miguel announced, stirring sugar into his coffee. "Says there's a whole list of problem properties that need correction." "How many we talking?" Raul asked. 5 more after Connor. Old man Peterson's got that workshop shed that's apparently too close to the property line. The widow on Elm Street's got unauthorized deck extensions. Taylor's got documentation on all of them. Raul lowered his voice. "What's his deal anyway? Why is he so hot to get rid of these people?" Miguel glanced around the diner. "You didn't hear this from me, but Taylor's got some developer buddy interested in buying up properties cheap. Says once all the troublemakers are gone, they can flip the whole neighborhood upscale. We're talking serious money." "So we're what, the cleanup crew?" $300 per job, cash, and Taylor promised bonus work if we can get Connor to sell fast. Guy's sitting on the prime corner lot, worth maybe $400,000 if developed right. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. Payoff, flashlight, detail. This wasn't about HOA violations. This was a land grab, pure and simple. I followed them again, watched them drive to old Peterson's place 4 blocks over. By noon, Peterson's workshop shed was reduced to a pile of lumber and twisted metal. Peterson himself sat on his front steps, looking 20 years older than he had yesterday. That afternoon brought a knock on my door. Detective Cole stood on my porch, hat in hand, looking uncomfortable. "Mr. Connor, I need to ask you about the noise complaints." "What noise complaints?" 3 separate reports filed yesterday about loud construction sounds, power tools running at unauthorized hours, disturbing the peace. He consulted his notepad. "All from your address." I gestured at my broken gate, the scattered sawhorses, the complete absence of any construction equipment. "Detective, does it look like I'm doing construction?" That's what I told them, but the complaints are official. Someone's saying you're violating city noise ordinances. "Let me guess. Ronald Taylor filed these complaints." Cole's silence was answer enough. "Look, Mr. Connor, between you and me, something stinks about this whole situation, but I can't investigate complaints that aren't technically false. The reports claim construction noise. You've got construction materials on your property." He shrugged helplessly. "My hands are tied." After he left, I walked through my house, really looking at it for the first time in months. 23 years I'd lived here, raised my daughter here before cancer took my wife, built the workshop in the garage, planted the oak tree out front, knew every neighbor's name. Now half of them wouldn't make eye contact. That evening, my daughter Sarah called from Portland. We talked every few days since her mom passed, but tonight she sounded worried. "Dad, I got a weird call from someone claiming to be from your homeowner association. Said there were concerns about your property maintenance, asked if I knew your financial situation." The phone creaked in my grip. "They called you?" "Guy named Taylor, very polite, very concerned. Said neighbors were worried about you keeping up with repairs, maintaining property values." Her voice got smaller. "Dad, is everything okay? Are you having money trouble?" "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just some neighborhood politics. Because if you need help, or if you want to move closer to us..." "Sarah, I'm not going anywhere." After I hung up, I sat in the dark kitchen, thinking about the Garcia brothers and their casual conversation about cleaning out troublemakers, about Taylor's developer friend and prime corner lots, about my daughter getting harassing phone calls designed to make her worry about my competence. Payoff, sneakers sound. I remembered those sneakers slapping wet pavement, running from my flashlight beam. Professional vandals, hired muscle, working a systematic plan to drive out long-term residents. But here's what Taylor didn't know about SWAT training. When someone threatens your position, you don't abandon it. You dig in, gather intelligence, and strike back where they don't expect it. I opened my laptop and started researching property records, HOA bylaws, and city ordinances. If Taylor wanted to play hardball with documentation and regulations, he was about to discover that 2 could play that game. The next morning brought another certified letter, this one from a law firm I'd never heard of. Notice of intent to pursue forced sale for chronic HOA violations. They'd moved from fines to foreclosure. But that night, everything changed. Tommy Murphy appeared at my back door just after sunset, moving like he was dodging sniper fire. The kid looked scared, which made two of us. Mr. Connor, I can't stay long, but I had to tell you something. He kept glancing toward his house. My dad found out I helped you with the gate wiring. He's furious. Tommy, you don't have to... No, listen, there's more. He pulled out his phone, hands shaking slightly. I recorded something this morning. The Garcia brothers were at the diner again, but this time they weren't alone. He played the audio, static, clinking coffee cups, then voices I recognized. Miguel, how's the Connor situation progressing? That was Taylor's voice, no question. Guy's stubborn, keeps trying to fix the gate, filed police reports, making noise about investigations. Well, we need to accelerate the timeline. My business associate is getting impatient. How quickly can you make his property unlivable? Unlivable? That was Raul sounding uncertain. Nothing permanent, just enough to encourage relocation. Maybe some plumbing issues, electrical problems. You boys are creative. The recording ended. Tommy looked up at me with wide eyes. Mr. Connor, they're planning to sabotage your house. Not just the gate, everything. I felt that cold calculation settle in. The same mental shift that used to kick in during high-risk operations. When? Soon. Taylor mentioned something about a 48-hour window before the legal proceedings get complicated. The forced sale notice. They needed me out before I could mount a proper legal defense. Tommy, I need you to stay away from this now. Your family... My family thinks you're the problem, he said bitterly. Dad says you're a troublemaker who's bringing down property values. Mom agrees with him. They're scared. People do stupid things when they're scared. Well, I'm scared too, but I'm not stupid. Tommy stood up, squaring his shoulders. These guys are criminals, Mr. Connor. Someone has to do something. After he left, I sat in my kitchen, processing what I'd learned. Taylor wasn't just running some petty HOA power trip. He was orchestrating a systematic campaign to drive out residents and flip their property to developers. The Garcia brothers were his enforcement arm, and I was next on their list for the full treatment. Have you ever felt like you're fighting a war where the other side keeps changing the rules? I spent the next hour documenting everything. The recording, the property research, the pattern of harassment. Then I made a decision that would have gotten me kicked off the force 20 years ago. I was going to fight dirty. That night, I drove to the Garcia brothers' apartment complex on the south side of town. Old building, security cameras that probably hadn't worked since the Clinton administration. I parked 2 blocks away and walked. Their pickup truck sat in the lot, tools scattered in the bed like they'd been in a hurry. I didn't touch anything, just observed. License plate numbers, work schedules, patterns of behavior, intelligence gathering, not sabotage. But as I was leaving, I noticed something interesting. The truck's registration tags were 3 months expired. I called it in anonymously to the police tip line. The next morning brought sirens. Miguel Garcia got pulled over 6 blocks from my house, probably on his way to begin phase 2 of Taylor's harassment campaign. Expired registration, no insurance, and a truck bed full of bolt cutters, wire strippers, and lock-picking tools he couldn't explain. My phone rang an hour later. Mr. Connor, this is Ronald Taylor. I understand there's been some confusion about your property compliance issues. What kind of confusion, Ron? Well, it seems some of our maintenance contractors have run into legal difficulties. Nothing that affects you directly, of course. I could hear the strain in his voice. Of course not. Perhaps we can work out a more reasonable timeline for your gate situation. The board is willing to consider a 30-day extension if you submit detailed compliance plans. That's generous. We're reasonable people, Mr. Connor. We just want what's best for the neighborhood. After he hung up, I allowed myself a small smile. One Garcia brother in custody, the other probably lying low, Taylor scrambling to find new muscle. But this was just buying time. That afternoon, Detective Cole stopped by again, this time looking interested instead of apologetic. Mr. Connor, funny thing happened today. We arrested a guy for expired registration, found a truck full of burglary tools. When we ran his prints, turns out he's got priors for breaking and entering, destruction of property. Huh. Gets better. His brother showed up at the station trying to bail him out. Starts talking about how they were just doing property maintenance for some HOA guy. It says they got receipts, documentation, the whole thing. I kept my expression neutral. Any idea who this HOA guy might be? Working on it. But here's what's interesting. The work orders they showed us, all dated after your vandalism report, like someone was trying to create a paper trail backwards. Cole leaned against his patrol car, studying my face. You wouldn't happen to know anything about an anonymous tip that led to this arrest, would you? Detective, I've been sitting here waiting for my property to be vandalized again. Haven't had time for much else. He nodded slowly. Well, if you do happen to see anything suspicious, you've got my number. That evening, Sarah called again. Dad, the weirdest thing happened. That Taylor guy called back, apologizing for the confusion. Said there had been some kind of administrative error and everything with your property was resolved. That's good news. But Dad, he sounded scared, like genuinely frightened. What's going on over there? I looked out my window at the broken gate, the yellow caution tape, the evidence of a war that was far from over. Just neighborhood politics, sweetheart. Nothing I can't handle. But even as I said it, I knew Taylor would regroup, find new angles of attack. The Garcia brothers were just hired muscle. The real enemy was still out there, and now I'd made him desperate. Desperate people make dangerous mistakes. The mistake came 72 hours later, wrapped in legal letterhead and delivered by a process server who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Mark Connor, you've been served with an emergency injunction from the Homeowner Association Administrative Board. I read it twice before the words sank in. Emergency health and safety violation. Immediate property condemnation pending full structural inspection, mandatory vacation of premises within 24 hours. The process server shifted uncomfortably. Sir, I'm just delivering papers, but if I were you, I'd get a lawyer fast. 24 hours to vacate. They weren't just trying to harass me anymore. They wanted me gone, completely, permanently. I called the number on the injunction. A receptionist with a voice like crushed glass connected me to someone claiming to be legal counsel for the administrative board. Mr. Connor, this is Attorney Morrison. I trust you've received our emergency filing. What emergency? My house is fine. According to our certified inspection, your property shows evidence of structural damage, potential electrical hazards, and violations that pose immediate danger to neighboring residents. What certified inspection? Nobody's inspected my house. Our records show inspection occurred yesterday at 2 p.m. You weren't present, but our inspector was able to assess exterior conditions and identify serious concerns. I was getting that familiar taste of rage again. Let me guess, your inspector was Ronald Taylor. I'm not at liberty to discuss specific personnel. However, if you'd like to contest this emergency order, you're welcome to file an appeal. Process typically takes 60 to 90 days. 60 days? Long enough for them to demolish my house and sell the lot. What happens if I don't vacate? Sheriff's deputies will remove you tomorrow evening. Your personal property will be placed in county storage at your expense. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen looking around at 23 years of memories, family photos on the refrigerator, my wife's coffee mug still in the cabinet, the growth chart we'd marked on the doorframe tracking Sarah's height every birthday. Have you ever felt like your entire life was being erased by strangers with clipboards? I called Tommy Murphy's cell phone. He answered on the first ring. Mr. Connor, I can't talk long. My parents think I'm at work. Tommy, I need your help one more time. They're trying to condemn my house. What? Emergency injunction. Claim there was an inspection yesterday that found structural damage. I need to know if you saw anyone around my property while I was out. Silence for a moment. Then, Mr. Connor, yesterday around 2, I saw Mr. Taylor's Honda parked across from your house. He was taking pictures with some kind of tablet, spent maybe 20 minutes walking around your yard, writing stuff down. Was he alone? No, sir. There was another guy with him, older, wearing a suit. They were pointing at your foundation, your roof, making a big show of looking concerned. The fake inspection? Taylor had brought some accomplice to document imaginary structural problems, then rushed to court with emergency papers before I could respond. Tommy, would you be willing to sign a statement saying you witnessed this? Mr. Connor, His voice cracked. My parents found out about the recording I made. They're talking about sending me to live with my uncle in Michigan. Say I'm getting involved with the wrong people, making trouble for the family. I understood. The kid had already risked enough. Tommy, you've done more than anyone had a right to ask. Keep your head down. Keep your family safe. I'm sorry, Mr. Connor. I wish I could do more. That evening, I drove through the neighborhood, looking at it with new eyes. Peterson's workshop demolished. The widow on Elm Street had a "for sale" sign in her yard. Henderson's garden fence was gone, replaced by a regulation height chain link. Taylor's cleanup was working. One by one, the longtime residents were being driven out. But as I turned onto my street, I noticed something that made me stop the truck and stare. Every house on the block had the same small white sign planted in the front yard. Property managed by Sunrise Development Group, coming soon, luxury community living. They had already sold the neighborhood to developers, every house, including mine. I parked in my driveway and walked to Henderson's yard, reading the fine print on her sign. Pre-approved building permits. Construction begins January 2025. 3 months away. The whole HOA harassment campaign, the Garcia brothers, the fake violations. It was all just a smokescreen to clear out existing residents before bulldozers arrived. Taylor wasn't working for the homeowner association. He was working for Sunrise Development, probably had been from the beginning. And tomorrow, sheriff's deputies would remove me from property that had already been sold to make way for luxury condos. I walked back to my house, looking at it like I was seeing it for the first time. The oak tree I'd planted when Sarah was 5, the workshop where I'd built her treehouse, the kitchen where my wife had taught her how to make pancakes. All of it scheduled for demolition. But here's what Taylor and his developer friends didn't understand about 23 years of SWAT operations. When someone backs you into a corner with nowhere to retreat, that's when you become most dangerous. I had 18 hours before the sheriff arrived, time enough for one last gamble, if I was willing to risk everything. Payoff, gate, sound. I looked at my broken gate one final time, remembering the sound of metal grinding to a halt 3 nights ago. That's when this war started. Tomorrow, I was going to finish it. At 6 a.m., I was sitting in Murphy's Diner with a cup of coffee and a digital audio recorder, waiting for the Garcia brothers' morning routine. Miguel had made bail, and sure enough, both brothers shuffled in, right on schedule, looking tired and paranoid. But this time, they weren't alone. Ronald Taylor sat with them in the corner booth, and he was angry. I could hear every word from 3 tables away. "You idiots nearly blew everything," Taylor hissed. "Getting arrested with burglary tools? What were you thinking?" "You said handle the Connor problem," Miguel shot back. "We handled it." "Subtly," I said, "handle it subtly. Now the police are asking questions, and Connor's still in his house." Raul leaned forward. "Look, the legal thing's working, right? Sheriff kicks him out tonight. Problem solved." "The legal thing only works if nobody examines it too closely," Taylor said. "And thanks to your amateur hour performance, people are starting to ask questions." I adjusted my position, making sure the recorder was getting clear audio. "So what's the plan now?" Miguel asked. Taylor glanced around the diner nervously. "Sunrise Development wants this wrapped up clean. No investigations, no loose ends. After Connor's gone tonight, you two disappear for a while. Take a vacation, lay low until the construction starts." "What about our money?" "You'll get paid. But if either of you gets arrested again, or if Connor somehow figures out the connection to Sunrise, then we have a problem." Bingo. Taylor had just confessed to conspiracy, fraud, and probably half a dozen other felonies, all caught on digital audio. I slipped out of the diner before they noticed me, drove straight to Detective Cole's office, and handed him the recorder. "Detective, I think you need to hear this." Cole listened to the entire recording twice, his expression growing darker with each replay. "Mr. Connor, this is conspiracy to commit fraud, filing false legal documents, probably RICO violations if we can prove the pattern. Problem is, we need more than just recorded conversations." "What kind of more?" "Documentation. Paper trail showing the connection between Taylor and this development company. Evidence that the inspection was falsified, that the emergency order was fraudulent." I thought about the Sunrise Development signs, the pre-approved building permits, the suspicious timing of everything. "Detective, what if I told you I could get you inside Taylor's house, tonight, while he's distracted with the sheriff's eviction?" Cole studied my face carefully. "Mr. Connor, I can't authorize any kind of breaking and entering." "Of course not. But if someone happened to discover evidence of fraud in plain sight, say during a welfare check on a concerned neighbor, that would require probable cause for a welfare check. What if someone reported seeing suspicious activity? Maybe unusual amounts of smoke coming from someone's house, like they might be burning documents. Cole was quiet for a long moment. Hypothetically, if such a report came in, and if responding officers discovered evidence of criminal activity in plain sight during a legitimate welfare check, hypothetically, I'd need that report to come from a credible witness who observed the suspicious activity firsthand. I checked my watch. 4 hours until the sheriff arrived to evict me. Time enough for one last gamble. Detective, keep your radio on tonight, around 7 p.m. That afternoon, I made 2 phone calls. First to Sarah. Dad, I've been worried sick. Someone called, claiming to be from the sheriff's department, said you were being evicted for safety violations. Hey, Sarah, listen carefully. Tomorrow morning, call this number. I gave her Detective Cole's direct line. Tell him you're my emergency contact and you want to report suspicious financial activity related to my property. Dad, what's going on? Just insurance, sweetheart. Making sure all the pieces are documented properly. The second call was to Tommy Murphy. Mr. Connor, I can't... Tommy, I'm not asking you to do anything dangerous. Just make one phone call tonight at exactly 7 p.m. Report smoke coming from Ronald Taylor's house. Enough smoke that you're concerned about a fire. Is there going to be a fire? No, but there's going to be smoke. At 6:30, I parked 2 blocks from Taylor's house and walked through the alley behind his property. His home office window faced the backyard, and through the glass, I could see him feeding documents into a paper shredder, destroying evidence, just like I'd hoped. I lit 3 road flares and tossed them onto his back patio, where they'd create impressive amounts of smoke without actually igniting anything. Then I called Tommy. Now, Tommy, make the call now. 7 minutes later, fire trucks and police cars converged on Taylor's house. I watched from across the street as Detective Cole and 2 other officers responded to the possible structure fire. When they found Taylor in his office, frantically shredding documents while smoke poured past his windows, they had probable cause to investigate. What they found was a gold mine, contracts with Sunrise Development dating back 8 months, falsified inspection reports, forged emergency orders, and financial records showing Taylor had received over $50,000 for resident relocation services. The sheriff's deputies never made it to my house that night. They were too busy arresting Ronald Taylor for fraud, conspiracy, and filing false legal documents. But even as I watched Taylor get loaded into the back of a patrol car, I knew the victory was incomplete. The development signs were still up, the bulldozers were still coming, and tomorrow, Sunrise Development would send lawyers and new enforcers to finish what Taylor had started. I'd won the battle, but the war was far from over. The bulldozers arrived anyway. 3 weeks after Taylor's arrest, Sunrise Development showed up with a fleet of orange machinery and a new legal team. Turns out Taylor was just middle management. The real power was a corporation with deep pockets and judges who owed favors. I stood in my driveway, watching them position equipment around Peterson's demolished workshop when Detective Cole pulled up. Mr. Connor, we got Taylor on fraud charges, but the development contracts are legal. Sunrise bought these properties through shell companies months ago. They own everything except your house. What about the falsified inspection, the emergency order? Thrown out along with all the HOA violations. You're clear legally. He paused. But they don't need legal harassment anymore. They'll just build around you. I looked at the construction signs, the surveyor's stakes, the machinery preparing to tear down my neighbors' homes. In 6 months, I'd be living on a postage stamp, surrounded by luxury condos. There's something else, Cole said. Miguel Garcia wants to make a deal. Says he's got information about other neighborhoods, other residents who got the Taylor treatment. Turns out this wasn't Sunrise's first cleanup operation. That night, I sat in my kitchen with a bottle of beer and my laptop, researching Sunrise Development. What I found made my stomach turn. 7 neighborhoods over 5 years. Same pattern every time. Plant an HOA enforcer, harass longtime residents until they sell cheap, bulldoze everything for luxury development. Hundreds of families displaced, thousands of homes destroyed, all perfectly legal. But here's what Taylor and Sunrise never understood about SWAT training. Sometimes the mission isn't about winning. Sometimes it's about making sure the other guy loses everything too. I called Sarah at 11 p.m. Dad, you sound different. What's wrong? Sarah, I need you to do something for me. Tomorrow morning, contact every news station in the state. Tell them you've got documentation of systematic housing fraud, elderly exploitation, corporate conspiracy to displace residents. Dad, are you sure about this? I'm sure. And Sarah, start packing. You're about to have a house guest. What do you mean? I looked around my kitchen one last time, memorizing the way morning light fell across my wife's favorite chair, the sound the old refrigerator made when it kicked on, the view of the oak tree through the window. I'm selling the house, sweetheart, moving to Portland to be near you and the grandkids. But Dad, I thought you said you'd never leave. I said I wouldn't be driven out. That's different than choosing to leave on my own terms. The next morning brought reporters, camera crews, and FBI agents interested in Detective Cole's evidence about interstate fraud. Miguel Garcia's information led them to shell companies, bribed officials, and a conspiracy spanning multiple states. Sunrise Development's stock price dropped 40% in 2 days. But the real victory came when I called the reporter from Channel 7 and made them an offer they couldn't refuse. You want the exclusive on this story? I'll give you everything. Documents, recordings, witness statements. But I want something in return. What's that, Mr. Connor? I want you to buy my house, full market value, $400,000. Mr. Connor, we're a news station, not a real estate company. You're a corporation that needs a local office, right? Perfect tax write-off. And imagine the story. News station purchases home at center of development scandal, preserves community landmark. They bought it, not because they needed an office, but because the publicity was worth millions in advertising. 2 months later, I stood on Sarah's porch in Portland, watching my grandkids play in the yard, when my phone rang. Mr. Connor, this is Detective Cole. Thought you'd want to know. Sunrise Development just filed for bankruptcy. FBI seized their assets, and the DOJ is pursuing criminal charges against 12 executives. What about the other neighborhoods? Residents are getting their homes back. Turns out when you expose a conspiracy this big, a lot of people want to make things right. I hung up and walked to the mailbox, where a thick envelope waited with the Channel 7 logo. Inside was a check for $400,000 and a note. Thank you for trusting us with your story. The house will be preserved as a community center. That evening, Sarah found me sitting on the back porch, staring at the sunset. Dad, you could have fought them, kept the house, stayed put. Could have. But sometimes winning isn't about keeping what you have. Sometimes it's about making sure the bad guys pay the price for trying to take it. I thought about Tommy Murphy, probably off at college now, away from parents who chose fear over justice. About Detective Cole, still fighting corruption one case at a time. About all the families who'd get their homes back because someone finally shone a light on the darkness. Besides, I said, watching my granddaughter chase fireflies across the lawn, some things are more important than winning. Sarah sat down beside me. Like what? I smiled, thinking about Taylor in federal prison, about Sunrise executives facing RICO charges, about neighborhoods full of families who'd never have to fear corporate vultures again. Like making sure it never happens to anyone else. The oak tree still stands in my old front yard. Channel 7 built a small memorial garden around it, with a plaque that reads, "In memory of communities lost to greed, and in honor of those who fight back." Sometimes people ask me if I regret selling. Truth is, I sleep better at night knowing I didn't just save my own house. I helped save hundreds of others. And that's a victory worth more than any piece of property.